Yeah. You got the back over, they've gone over.
Okay, so first of all, thank you all for coming. I'm hopefully going to make this a day to remember. I know we've just passed over Easter, but what I said on the website when I posted some material to various people, it's like a resurrection or an Easter rising. And I maintain that what we have to cover today can actually be the end to this sort of financial banking monopoly that's held everybody in slavery for quite a considerable amount of time. What a lot of people might say is, well, how can I, or we, think we can break a system that the great and the good, and people probably much better than us and maybe better organised, have failed to break in the past? Because when you see the number of people, even in the 1920s and the 1930s, both in the United States and in the United Kingdom, one guy called Congressman McFadden in the United States campaigned severely against the Federal Reserve. They tried to poison him, and they tried to do various things, and eventually the chap ended dead. John F. Kennedy assassinated. One of the reasons behind it was as an executive order, I think it was EO 1111, which was to reintroduce the greenback and take back the control of the money supply. Various organisations and people have tried in the past and have always failed, it would appear. So what makes it a bit different this time, possibly? Well, there is something called the Federal Reserve Act, and that was passed into law in 1913. It was sneaked through the Congress or the Senate just when the recess was about to begin. I think that was the 24th or 23rd of December 1913. And what would appear to have happened there is there was a secret or a secretive agreement which was authorised or conspired on a place called Jekyll Island, and that really brought in, from what we can gather, a 100-year, should we say, patent or right protecting people, the J.P. Morgan family, the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, the monetary or moneyed interests in Europe, to do what they wanted with the global monetary supply in the 100 years. And that 100 years, therefore, in 2013, lapsed. So there is possibly an energetic backdoor through this, that now, when you see the actual state of the global monetary system, with the European Central Bank and all these people jockeying for position, the Federal Reserve, quantitative easing, Mario Draghi, the head of the European Central Bank, says they're going to pump, 60 billion a month into the European markets. We can see it's all mathematically going the wrong way, and something therefore needs to happen. This is probably, or can be, it. There's lots of other organisations out there that are trying similar things. There are people who are looking towards the Bradbury pound as an option. There are other people who are talking about parallel or complementary currencies. There's the Positive Money Organisation. There's the British Constitutional Groups, Lawful Bank. The one thing I would say about the WeRe bank system is it isn't original, i.e. there are parts that are being done in other places, but what I think the originality to it is the way it's been brought together and the way that it marries up the time structure. So one of the things that we need to address throughout all of this is money or wealth, really, apart from, say, what you own as real estate or a physical object that you can transport. It's all just a state of mind. It's what you give money credibility for. A glass of water in here isn't probably worth too much, but if you're dying of thirst in the desert, you would give everything you have to possess it. Having your waste bin emptied isn't of any great value until it's been sitting on the drive for 2 weeks, non-collected, and then it's got a much higher monetary, or should we say, tradable value. So what we're trying to do here is get people to start thinking, as all these organisations have, or often. There's the people in the United States who have talked about something called the Robin Hood tax. There are other people that I was involved in sort of last year a little bit, and they were talking about something called the financial transaction tax, which is very valid, and we're going to touch on it. There's people who've talked about the global collateral accounts. There's something called prepaid treasury. There are people trying to access this so-called pot of global trust money that we are all supposed to be entitled to. But the one problem everybody's facing is it is all totally reliant on them either acknowledging that you've got the right to access it, or somehow you've been able to squirrel under the wire and get a hold of it. So these are some of the things that the ideology, the spiritual directive, and this consequence of what this bank is for seeks to address. Because I'd like to emphasise that I fully believe that there's a spiritual quest we're all on, and without this spiritual assistance, whether you think it's a guardian angel, or whether you think it's a nature spirit, whether you think it's an extraterrestrial gestalt, think of it as you will, or if you believe in Jesus or the Holy Spirit, you could go down that way as well. But it can't all be one-sided, because if there's a dark side that's trying to control the energy and the wealth and in fact, energetic theft, then there must be something on the other side, because you can't have one without the other. You know, we've got day and night and up and down and black and white and hot and cold. So this is the directive here, and this is what I'm staking the future of this on, that it is either something or it's nothing. This is absolutely total lunacy and idiocy, or it will work. I could say it can work, but if we go down the can work route, it puts a little bit of doubt in. And it all comes down ultimately to the decision of the people on the planet through informed consent. Once you know that the gorilla's in the room, you can either carry on ignoring it, or you're going to go and do something with it. You know, ask it to leave, or wrestle it, or change the colour of it. You do what, but you've got to know it's there. And this is the problem that people are facing generally. We have all been steeped in this pool of ignorance for hundreds of years, thousands of years, we could say. One of the greatest teachers of all time threw the money changers out of the temple. I mean, it's no coincidence that these things have been identified. Usury in Islam is against the law. The Catholic Church used to have this confrontation with the Jewish element, but probably more the Zionist element, for many, many centuries, because for the Catholic Church, usury was against their canons and their dictates. So how has it all crept in? Well, it's crept in from these, what's called the Florentine, Venetian, Genovese merchant families, who, through the aid of the backing of Rome and the outpourings of Caesarian Rome, had complete domination of the trade routes. They had the domination of the trade routes right the way through southern Europe, down the Silk routes into China. Pasta, it's noodles. It came from China. So when you're eating pasta and you think, whoa, aren't the Italians clever? No, it's noodles. And that's all. So they brought great wealth, great knowledge, but also then the double entry bookkeeping system, where they had everything on a ledger, plus on one side, minus on the other. That accounts very much for today why these super rich mandarins and oligarchs and members of the aristocracy and the monarchies of Europe are so involved in philanthropic projects, because they understand that they're fucking everybody over, but at the same time they think they can buy themselves out by earning spiritual merit on the other side. Another big factor to it is as well, whether you believe it or not isn't the point, but they understand a spiritual, universal truth that energy doesn't die and it goes on. Whether you want to call that reincarnation, whether you want to call that, I don't know, probably that's the only thing we can call it. But you know, your life doesn't end when you die. So this is why there's the breeding program for, say, all the East Coast bloodlines in the United States. This is why the royal family breeds within its own, you know, should we say, genetically acceptable pools. This is why the royal family, not only the Arab royals of the Middle East, but also the Queen and Prince Philip and all the rest, are into breeding of horses. This is why people like Prince Charles are into, you know, husbandry with bee populations and peas, because they've got quite a fast genetic mutation line you can follow. So they are into all of that, and the official reaction or view that they thrust down your throat through the propaganda media is that, oh, it's a load of rubbish, don't pay any attention to that. So the objective is to demoralize the planet. Yeah? They want to take it down to its basic animalistic level, where everybody is deemed to be just almost a monkey that's good for pulling a truck or stacking a shelf. And that's what they see you as, and therefore they're not your friend. It then ties in then to quite a very intricate web that they've woven around you for many, many years, only because most of you, and when I say you, I mean your ancestors, were kept in illiterate, poor, deprived conditions where, you know, if they could manage to live to the age of 50, they were very wise and they'd done very well. And in this day we talk about life expectancy pushing up and moving on, and it's all getting better, but is the quality of life any better? You know, with cancer, dementia, diabetes, I mean, everybody's got it, you know. If you don't have it, there's something wrong with you. You could say that. So that's just to let people know the dimension that this is coming from. This isn't a 2012, oh, I think I'm going to just put number plates on the car, the Peter of it, the van thing, and go off. You know, I notified, and this is another thing that people should be aware of. Before I even made one turn of the wheel onto the road, I notified the Attorney General, who I'd been having, this is a guy called Dominic Grieve. I had notified him of what I was going to be doing, and also notified them that I was, should I say, disassociating myself and taking back all title and control of my life from a government organisation or a state or any of these nefarious alphabet agencies, CIA, MI5, ABC, BBC, whatever you want to call them, organisations who stated that they would exert any control. So I made the first affidavit, waited 30 days, no reply. I sent the second affidavit, 30 days, no reply. And at the end of that, then I sent something called a notice of estoppel, which then forbade them bringing this issue up at a later date. I also pointed out that no action was ever to be brought against me by any constable or unit of the United Kingdom, I mentioned France and Germany here, without the express permission of the Attorney General. So what I've done in my mind is, if I'm getting hassled, I know it's coming from him, whether he actually, or the police are actually taking any notice of it or not, or the other authorities, it doesn't matter. I nominated him and I put him on the spot. One thing that people should know within a spiritual, energetic, shall we say, game plan, who believes in spirit energy or life after death or extraterrestrials or when, yeah, okay. Well, generally speaking, and I'll try and keep this quick, there is either service to self or, generally speaking, then service to other. Yeah? The vast majority of people on the planet at the moment are what's called, if you read something called the raw material, people who are drowning in a sea of, or a morass of indifference. Yeah? They haven't sparked left or right. And usually what happens when populations get into these ruts on cycles, catalyst has to be applied. So catalyst has to be a physical action that actually burns into the DNA for you to then ensoul in a particular direction. So Most of the people maintain that they're happy and they're loving and they would do anything for their children, but unless it extends from the family group outside, it's no different than Cheney, Rumsfeld, the Bushes, the Clintons. They would protect the lives of their children with a gun. But anything outside the family group, forget it. Yeah, it's of no concern. That's why they'll happily walk past people on the street and they see everybody else out there externally as not part of their family. Whereas Buddhism, Hinduism, Jainism, the Zoroastrians, they teach more of we're all one and we're all needing to go together. So if you don't go together, you end up in a very sort of sticky, lonely place. And ultimately, what they're trying to drive this planet into is a service to self, prison planet, typically identified by the fact, if you look at the reptilian aspect of all of this, or what a prison community is like, it's insular, it's usually patriarchal, it's tyrannical, it's territorial, it's violent, it's got little moral fibre to it. So there's these things that you'll look at the planet and go, yeah, it's definitely going that way. And what we're in is a Babylonian sort of ghost existence now, where money is king and nothing else matters. And that's why everything on the planet's been monetized. Everything. From the time you walk out now, statistically, you cannot get through a week without making a violation of some sort. Some you're caught on, some you're not. But statistically, over the course of a few months, that camera bloody got me, or I just didn't have enough change. You come back to your car, you've even got the ticket then. So the idea is that they monetize you out of existence, and what they've done is criminalize the very act of living and staying alive. Now, that has to be right or wrong. We're, for now, in a polarized society. We're in this sort of, and this is the significance of the Christ. You might see sometimes holding these three fingers up on these little icons. Venus, Jupiter, Saturn, and then you've got Mercury and the Sun. So it's a 3-2 representation of what you need to do. You need to go from a dualistic perspective to what's called a triune or a trilogy. Because in here it's black, white, up, down, man, woman, right, wrong, hot, cold. Here it's innocent, guilty, maybe not, hot, cold, tepid, black, white, grey. Yeah? So that's where the ideology of the mindset needs to go. So I've gone on about the spiritual side a little bit there because it's very important, and if we don't have that under our feet, we're really not going to get anywhere, because they've got bigger tanks, they've got bigger guns, they've got weaponry, they've got things that the Norwegian defence minister, she came out the closet a few years ago and said when she first went into the government, she was briefed and shown some of the technology, and it was 50 years ahead of where we all think it is. So some very, very nasty, tricky technology which is arrayed against us, from the chemtrails through to the phone towers, through the fact that they might try and put in what's called holographic insert technology, which is an ability to project into the atmosphere holographic images. This is why they're leading you down the 3D route. This is why, virtual reality, you've got the Microsoft holodeck thing now, whatever it's called. So there is an agenda, and you're it. Okay? So we've got to try and do something about it. What I've said before is, I think there are three main planks to us getting our lives back and some type of control within this organisation of what we call planet Earth, or the world. So we've got the Earth, there's nothing wrong with the Earth, but the world is nothing more than us. Yeah? And you would actually say, on a universal perspective, giving and receiving are one. Right? Because if you don't have anything to receive, you can't actually give. Unless you have a glass, you can't pour the wine. Unless you've got the form of the bottle, you can't actually put the wine within it. So everything that we're doing, we need the other side to be able to do it. Yeah? So people have got to think, well, okay, well, if somebody gives me the opportunity to work, without them giving me that, I couldn't have actually made the money that I'm going to get. So there has to be those who want it and those who want to do it. And this comes into some of the things we'll talk about with the banking structure now. So, that having been said, what I thought also it was quite an optional or interesting thing to do right now, because I had just a small conversation with some people just before the camera started to roll, is that just to tell people a little bit about me and where I come from, because, you know, it's very easy to look at people like Dean Clifford or Simon Spaniard or Rob Menard and so, well, what were they doing, you know, where did they come from and where did they get this zeal or appetite from. So I'm originally from Stoke-on-Trent. I went to a Catholic boys' grammar school up to the age of 18. I took a gap year because I got expelled from school at the very end, just for going out and getting a sandwich at lunchtime. And that's how strict it was in those days. And then I went to Liverpool University and did a law degree. I decided the law wasn't the thing I wanted to do, and therefore I then decided to join the army. So I went on what's called the RCB, Regular Commission Selection Board. So I passed that and then went in as on a short-term commission. Spent 6 months at Sandhurst, 6 months on what's called a Young Officers Communication Qualifying course at Blandford Forum Signals in Dorset, and then went to Germany for 2 years with the 1st Armoured Division HQ and Signal Regiment. That was a very bumpy period because a very good friend of mine, a chap called Tim Collins, who led 1st Armoured Brigade into Iraq. Remember when the second Iraq War? Tim Collins and myself were at Blandford Forum, and I nearly got court-martialed for defending Tim against some accusations that had been made against him. So I decided I would intervene, and I was the person that got into the fight, and therefore I nearly got court-martialed. I got moved from there and posted to Germany, I think 3 weeks before the official end of the course. So Tim Collins was the training commander for 22 SAS at Blandford Forum. So Tim is very well connected, and I keep thinking one day he might be able to help us when we need it. I don't know, but that's the connections there. So when I came out of the army, I then went to the Middle East, to Dubai, and I worked there for a financial services company giving tax advice to British expatriates, European expatriates, on how to look after their money, so-called, and to avoid taxation legally. Then I worked for 3 years for Zurich Insurance, based in Zurich initially, and then posted out to Dubai just at the time that the Iraq War commenced, and so that was 89 I think, yeah. And then I spent 3 years there, came back to the UK, set up a couple of businesses. The first one was providing exercise physiology testing to elite and performance athletes like Aston Villa and Millwall Football Club. We had a rendezvous scheduled for Manchester United and 1 or 2 other people, but the company folded before that could happen. And then I went back to trying to make money because I thought that was the best way. And so I set up a company called Touchstone 2000, and what I did is I taught people how to trade derivatives on the stock market. Right? And so if you don't know what derivatives are, they're the most toxic, poisonous, useless way of debilitating society you can imagine, but you can make very, very good money doing it. And I was very successful doing it, and I used to have a manual, 290 pages, like a telephone directory, and it used to run in the Daily Mail. The legal department had to verify it before it could go in under the advertising standards, and the strapline was 3 trades in 3 months, each producing 300% return or your money back. And we did it. consistently. I eventually then got an interview team come up from the FSA in London and threatened me with criminal prosecution and a fine unless I stopped doing it. And the other thing they wanted to know is where I got the information from, where I got the techniques from, and basically what was I, if I didn't take this bond out, I think it had to be something like an insurance bond for 5 million. They said I was giving trading advice, and I said I was giving educational advice. So that's really about that. 2001, I had a bit of a spiritual awakening, and from 2001 to now, I've had a bit of an existence. The clothes I have are all given to me, and I've lived in a camping car, lived in this cave in Spain, and so it's been a very sort of, traumatic and mind-opening event. So that's brought us up to where we're going to go now, and so we're going to have a little just sort of minute's pause while I just prepare the next part, because having got that all out of the way now, we're going to deal with WeRe Bank and what it means to you and what it can mean to you, and why I think it's the way forward, and it will work this time. Okay, so to continue, the next part now, having spoken about these amazingly important spiritual dimensions and aspects of the control mechanism that the global elite are forcing down people's necks, is really now to come on to sort of what we can do against it. I maintain that there are 3 sort of main planks within the global community, that if any one of them breaks, it will topple the table. So if you look at the analogy of a milking stool, a 3-legged stool that they used to milk cows, or used to, if you break any one of those legs, it incapacitates the stool. It's almost physically impossible to sit on it. The 3 legs that I think I've identified, and I think other people would agree, some would, one is the sovereignty issue. The sovereignty issue is the free man ideology. Who am I? Who owns me? What can a government tell me to do or not to do? And should the government be fearful of me, or should I be fearful of the government? And who's to describe me as a domestic terrorist because I want to change the way you oppress me? Well, that argument we can run that down 100 rabbit holes, and it's something though that ultimately people have got to address, because it's probably going to have to be addressed on the street or in a physical perspective. It can't be done by liking on Facebook or friending, or eventually the rubber's got to hit the road, and the people have got to make their will known. The next part would be free energy. Okay, people talk about it, people think it's not real, people think, what Tesla came up with in probably as early as the late 1890s is all just, fabrication and hocus pocus and nonsense, however it isn't. And then the third leg on that stool is the biggest single thing that no one has, and we all are spending 24 hours a day to try and get more of, and that's the money supply. The question then is, how come 99.99% of the world has nothing? And I even mean the people who've got 150,000 coming in from a business. You've got nothing. It's not even, the line of the majority of the populations is here, and there's just a little. Yet, the 0.001% of the people that handle it are the wealthiest people on the planet. The likes of Greenspan, Soros, Paulson, Geithner, the Rothschild family, the JP Morgan concerns, the Rockefellers, the Clintons. These are the people who are in control of all of this, and they're obscenely wealthy. But historically, that's the way it's been, and the problem with the mindset on the planet is we've all been inculcated into accepting it. Yeah? It's like a dog bred for water. or a pointer. When a pheasant goes down, it's, you know. So there's a part of us that we're all historically bound to, and from a genetic point of view, we're on the, you know, we're the last atom on the pin of the needle, and all our ancestors have gone back being conditioned. So it does take quite a bit to break out of the mindset of the cage. But it's going to have to be done because the future isn't pretty. Yeah? If you join the dots up from where it's come from, and I think the Panchen Lama, who was quite a very sort of incisive and spiritual individual, said, never ever look at the politician that stands in front of you, whether they're holding the child or campaigning on the campaign trail. Look at them like a ship that's crossing the ocean. Look at the wake. Yeah? Look what they've left behind. Yeah? Where's it come from? So all these people who are telling you they can fix it are the very same people that caused it. Yeah? So I actually wouldn't do that. If somebody's just wrecked my car as an engineer saying he knows how to fix it, or a mechanic, I certainly wouldn't let him back to look at it again. I'd say, no, I need to find someone who's a bit more competent. So this is the problem, and the game is that we think they're stupid and we think we're smart, but actually it's not really the case. They just do enough to get us and to help us along, and we do all the work. We expend all the energy, we keep the system going, nobody else does it. Yeah? We make the pizzas, we drive the ambulances, we drive the taxis, we empty the sewers, we do all of that while they sit very comfortably in their Canary Wharf buildings down in the city, making obscene profit, but it's gone on forever. So, as it's gone on forever, it either carry on a lot longer or we have to do something about it. Brings us on to the concept of what to do. We can't really go onto the street and demonstrate, because every time that's ever been done, the outcome is always the same. It's destruction of property, it's people getting their heads cracked open, it's a victory for the people. French Revolution, within 50 years, 95% of what the aristocracy had been deprived of was back in the hands of families that were closely tied with those type of families. It finds its way back in. Sometimes maybe the elite even don't mind that the masses let off steam, and maybe it's calculated that way. So we've got to try and think of something a bit different. So the best way to probably do it, I think, or imagine, is we don't actually attack the institutions themselves. We create a phantom or a more real one. That could be the phantom and ours could be more real. We park up alongside and we just dog it. Yeah? They pad it down the road, we pad it down the road. So we don't have to get into saying, for example, well, you know, we don't have as many banks as them, we don't have as much money as them, we don't need a military. We really are looking to set up a community of reasonably like-minded people. And what the WeRe Bank model is, that these are community-based banks. There isn't one bank somewhere like the Bank of England which controls all of this. The idea and the rationale for people who've gone onto the website, on the contact, there's two things. There's a flyer, PDF, and then there's something called a master document. On the master document, I think that's about 15 pages of information which explains various things. And there's a little flyer that people can download. I used to have quite a lot of these. And it just says, WeRe Bank, People's Banking System, common law banking, totally unique, a public bank, employment provider, solves financial dilemmas, it's morally sound, 100% protected. The idea is that the bank operates in a communally or geographically determined area. So within reason, it's bringing locality back or community back and trying to cement or re-cement the trust that the communities had with each other before. Because the future isn't international, it's actually local. People have got to start looking after themselves in their own local area. And what's happening is you're all, and I include myself, everybody's been mind condition to something that the CIA used very effectively, and they paid 2 psychologists to come up with it, and they've experimented with thousands of people on it, and it's something called learned helplessness. And learned helplessness is, it was originally probably demonstrated with the fact of laboratory animals, when subjected to random shocking, would exhibit a tendency, even when they got down to a level of starvation or thirst, unquenchable thirst, they wouldn't actually rise themselves up and move to the food bowl that was placed just in front of them. Because sometimes they'd get up and they'd be shocked, other times they wouldn't, and it got to a stage where they couldn't tell whether they were going to be, so they give up. Yeah? And learned helplessness is all the imaging that's coming out of the poisonous, toxic, sycophantic babble shite 24 hours a day on the radio, on the TV, on the newspapers. You're getting all this crap. Daily Telegraph 2 days ago, 80,000 will die if. The BBC, this, jihadists coming to Stoke-on-Trent or Italy or Rome. It's just a overwhelm of bad news that you can't do anything about. So what it does is, it actually is like putting the batteries in the electrical unit the wrong way. And we're all based around electrical energy. Everything that courses through your body is electrical energy. Your cells fire on it, the lights work on it, everything is the universe is an electrical equation. So when you've got this stuff coming into you all the time, seeing all these people that are dying and having their heads chopped off and being eaten, whatever they're doing to them, you think, oh, and it sinks into you, but you can't do anything you like, and this is why the charities are so prevalent. Give, give, give. But even when you don't give, you feel like I should give. So even there, when they don't win, they win. So they've intricately put this tapestry together, and they're spending untold amounts of money with these research departments and what's called NGOs, non-governmental organisations, that organise the marches and get the t-shirts ready and the banners when it's Women's Rights in Argentina week, you know. Wow, look at all that. Like this thing, Je suis Charlie, yeah, when the Charlie Hebdo thing went. Everyone in France had the t-shirt on. I live in France for quite a considerable amount of time. Every shop window had a photocopied piece of paper, Je suis Charlie. So the whole country, and quite a lot of Europe, could be mobilised. So you can see how it can be done, but, you know, I can't imagine it being done for a project that we're going to be putting out next week, no matter if Jesus and Buddha were standing here saying, hey, you know, it's a really good deal. Yeah? Yeah, okay, next time, thanks. So that's where it leads us now. So the concept of the bank, and the bank, I had to use the word bank, because if we'd have called it a cooperative, or if we called it just a licensed deposit taker, we'd have to have a license. The idea is to make it community-based so that it works within the community, people can understand how it can work, it can be locally run, and the other aspect of it is what's called finality of settlement, like under common law. So typically in the old days, if you had a silver coin and you wanted to buy something, he would say this is what the price is. You would give him the silver coin. It's finished. It's you and the buyer and the seller together exchanging. But now what we have is an extra 2 parties brought into the equation. There's the private commercial banking system, and then you've got the government, which is actually the people who are actually borrowing or raising the taxes to pay the bankers for the money that they're borrowing and keeping society going with. So we need to cut at least 2 of those legs off, or at least one, and have it as a communal people's bank where there is no interest, because interest and inflation, no matter what anyone says, are banking engineered tools. They don't exist. And if you don't think that's correct, just go onto Google, go onto something like financial statistics, go into the United States or the UK database and see what like a cost of living index might be. Go back, for example, and see what typically the gold price was, or what the price of a loaf of bread was in America from about 1820 up to about 1900. 60, 80 years, the same price. Yeah? So what you could do is, if you could get an amount of money together, you could safely rely on the fact that at X amount per week, you could stop working. If you dropped a coin down the settee and found it 15 years later, it'd buy you exactly the same as it did before, not when the bankers get involved. And people get confused, and I've heard a very intelligent guy the other day said, well, you've got to have these economic cycles of boom and bust. No, you haven't. It's called rowing. It's the stock market's favourite thing. That's why the stock never just goes up. It goes up and it goes down. It's called like a dog tooth. And it's called rowing. It's like in a boat. So they row it up and then they row it down and then they row it up. But the people who are controlling the market know where it's going beforehand. In the old days, they used to just know. Now they're using something called high-frequency trading. And high-frequency trading is trading at computer speed before the information even gets out onto the markets. So the idea behind where we're going with this is then the idea of the unit of currency. I took from the fact that in 2010 I was working with, or trying to work with, an organisation called the Global Settlement Foundation. And if you want to go onto the internet and have a look at that, I think it's probably one of the best websites there is, talking about finance and the general economic problems that we all face. The only problem I found, sorry Ray, if you ever get to listen to this, is I found Ray Sunderson, the guy who was really behind it, just a little bit too academic and, for my mind, a little bit impractical in the fact that they were going down the electronic route for having a gold-backed currency. A bit like Bitcoin, but different. Now, what Global Settlement Foundation were doing, though, and some very good work, they were working with the Organisation of African Unity to bring in something called the ORIC. Periodic Table of Elements. You go down to gold, it's not a G, it's AU for OR. Yeah? So they were trying to bring a gold-backed unit of currency in, and one of the main proponents that was working with them in North Africa was Muammar Gaddafi. And we all know what happened when they took a dislike to what he was doing. He wrote a very good article in the year of, was it 2012 when they took Libya down, or 13, can't remember. But in April or March of that year, he did a very, very interesting article in Paris Match, and he explained what he was about and what he wanted to do and what the African Unity wanted to do, and it was all good stuff. Question is, how did they allow him to run the country, as he did for 30 years, untouched, and then suddenly he becomes the #1 enemy in the world? It's quite amazing. Tony Blair's friend, the Queen's friend. In fact, in the early 80s, he was attending the University of Liverpool Department of Psychiatry to help him adjust with some of his fantasies. Is neither here nor there. But whatever he was trying to do good for the people, maybe when he was trying to do it. So the Global Settlement Foundation had this idea of taking the monetary supply in a particular direction. I always thought that if it went down the internet route, it was always hackable, it could be hijacked, the accounts could be altered. The classic thing that happens with Bitcoin or all of these depositories where people put their wealth in whatever form, real and deposited or created, is the fact that ultimately if the government wants to, as it controls the electronic back doors into all of this, no matter what the degree of encryption, and if anyone doubts that, there's a thing called PROMIS, PROMIS software that the Bushes took over, and that allows them to get through any encryption, because the actual encryption is based upon their software is that they have the back door that gets through the microcircuitry, and they just access anyway. So nothing is protected. They wouldn't allow that to go that way, because I believe the internet is doing exactly what it was meant to do. It's put as much confusion into the community as it gives answers. So the idea then is that we look at the solution, and originally it was to go to a paper-based type of transaction, where only for people who wanted to earn units of currency, they could go two ways. If they had £100 and wanted to put it with the bank, they could come and put it with the bank, and they would be given then the unit. Okay. The other way might be that they wanted to earn it, because one of the beauties of the idea is... Question?
Well, go on. No,
okay, sorry. The idea was that we had to give people a way of earning wealth that wasn't based on inflation, and it wasn't based on the fractional reserve interest-bearing equation, P for principal equals, or is always less than principal plus interest, so you can never get out of the cycle. What we had to give them is a way of earning, not on a contracted basis within the market as it currently stands, but they could actually earn, no matter where they were on the planet, an equal unit of currency to show their worth as a human being, whether they were in the ghettos in Lagos, whether they were in the favelas in Brazil, the street kids that have to pick up dirt and everything to try and sell plastic bottles to earn. Why shouldn't they get the same unit of currency as the person doing the community work or painting his mate's fence for the weekend over here? So there was an equipartition of energy that would globally move. And that's what this is. So they could then work for an hour or 2 or 5 or 40, it doesn't matter. Yeah? They would then get credited with that. Now you could say, well, okay, yeah, I know how are you going to know he's done it and he's not made it up? We don't care. You know, it's like the amount of fraud and the amount of hacking in the banks that goes on. You've got no idea how much of it is going on, how much is being fleeced or scammed out of your ATMs. You don't care as long as you're getting your money and you're okay. And that's really what the mindset is there. So that's one of the areas that I wanted to address, that the bank has actually got quite infinite supply. The Bank of England, European Central Bank, the IMF, the Bank for International Settlements, the Federal Reserve have got infinite supply because they're printing it. In fact, they're not even printing it, they're just creating it on a machine. Okay? And what the Bank of England 2014 first quarter policy document says is that we've all got it wrong in the past about how money comes into being. Academics and textbooks have misunderstood the system, they say, because what they have been saying is that a bank has to have a deposit or money in order to make a loan. But that's not correct, they say. They don't go into the fractional reserve aspect, but what they say is no, money comes into being the following way. The bank makes a loan to the customer, and that simultaneously generates a deposit in the account of the customer, which then supposedly leaves the door. So that's like saying, not only is the cart not before the horse, that we don't have one or the other. We don't need the horse because the cart will actually move, and it's the biggest scam. And as it says, there's a guy called Kenneth Galbraith, and he actually says that if people, the way that the bankers produce the money supply is so simple, it repels the mind. And that's the thing. It is so simple that there is no technique or mechanism. And all this bullshit, this flack, this smoke, and the tinsel that they throw up, and all the economic modelling and all the rest of it, doesn't really count for anything, because it is nonsense. It's not a science, because if it was a science, people could work it out. A science is, if you mix that with that, shake it up, it's going to fizz. They can't do that in the economic world, though they profess to. The next thing, quantitative easing and all this crap that they throw at you. I don't have a board behind me, but if you have £100 and 100 apples, and we say that one apple is worth £1, yeah? If I now double that money supply by creating extra money to 200, what's the apple worth? 50 pence. And on, and on, and on. So, as they print more and more money, what they're doing is they're actually devaluing the value of everything within the society. And so, with money at 0% and unprecedented amounts of money being pumped into the market, in the Federal Reserve in the United States, QE1 followed by QE2, QE3 didn't work. America's on its arse. It's been bought up by the Chinese for a reason, and now what we've got in Europe, they're addressing the same thing. So what didn't work in America, now we'll let it not work in Europe. And here's the trick: if you're pumping that amount of fuel into the cellar at 0% interest, or marginal, and interest rates ever have to go up, you're in big trouble, everyone. The whole system. And this is what they're playing with at the moment, I believe. They're just waiting for the opportune time to start to crank that up, and no one will know where the explosion came from. But the world is awash. Now, very quickly, where does the QE, quantitative easing, billions go? Does it go to you, or the people? No. Where it goes to, as the Bank of England explain, is it goes to the banks. And the banks lend that money then to the corporations, okay, who then have their stock values go up. Or bonds are bought by the pension funds, and all these people who are telling you there's no money in the pension anymore, we've got to go to austerity measures, you have to work till 75 now. In fact, you might even have to work in heaven or hell because, we just don't have enough money. Bullshit. It isn't factually correct. But everybody seems to go along with it. So these are the issues that have to be addressed. This money, this quantitative easing money that's getting thrown in, is why the stock markets are at all-time high. And if you look at Bloomberg, Financial Times, do a little word search. When you go back, UK companies, American companies are awash with cash. There's no austerity in the City of London. There's no austerity in New York and Washington. Warren Buffett, people like Bill Gates, they're obscenely richer than they even were in 2008. So we're all in an economic crisis, but they are all wealthier than they ever could be. Go onto the BBC or into YouTube and type super rich. There's a 2-part documentary, 54 minutes the first one, 1 hour 10 the other. Talks about the super rich, and now since 2008 they are incredibly, I think it's over 25% richer across the board, and how many extra billionaires there are. And so at that point, I think before we move on to looking now at the nitty gritty and then we'll do the questions, we'll have a little...
Just a pause.
Pause. Okay, so to continue, we'll now deal with, I know there's many questions and there's many sort of like side roads that are going off the main corridors here, but it'll be covered in time in different forums. Main priority at the moment is to try and make the website, WeRe Bank website, more friendly. because, and also the amount of traffic, just so that you know, just in case as well, it's important to mention, just so that you don't think, oh, well, you're you know, what is it about me? Is there something wrong with you for being here today? Bear in mind that I actually put the website up in 2012, in June. Traffic has been fairly light, but there's not been much on it. But since we've gone into this year, 2015, for whatever reason, from virtually the beginning of the year, there's a different energy about that's come, you know, and so it's brought us to this point, and it's very exciting, and it's something that wasn't there in 2012 or 13 or 14, but is there now. There are literally at the moment, I'd say between 50 and 70 emails a day coming in for people making inquiries, and there are probably at the moment around 5 to maybe 10 people a day joining, and it's a problem because there's only me to deal with the emails. So I went away at the printers yesterday, and I came back yesterday evening, and there's the emails and there's the... So I only mention that from the fact that it's not just you, whether you've joined or not, but why you've made the effort to come here today, which is the most important thing. So let's just now move on to, should we say, there's all these various rooms that you'll need to go into on the bank site, and there are various explanations, there's various documents. Nobody's expected to know it all or read it all. There will be a joining page that will be put on, which will make it a lot more simple for people to go through and join. But the main thing is it's people reliant. Without people, we can't do it. And one of the things I'd just like to impress upon you is I'm not in this business to make money. I'm one of the poorest people I know. I don't have property. I don't have a vehicle of my own. I don't have any assets. I've lived very, very poorly for many years. I spent 10 years, 6 of which were living in a camping car, a red Transit as well as. And I only mention that just so that, you know, maybe that carries through, that if anyone ever says, oh yeah, you know, all that is a money-making scheme. Well, yes it is, but it's not for me, it's for everybody out there. And what the making of the money is to basically reinstate the wealth to people, and therefore they can have quite, should we say, easier lifestyles than the ones they're being welded into now. So what I'll deal with first of all, I think, is the assets of WeRe. What does it have? Because I could go to the people at Positive Money and say, well, okay, it's a very, very good idea. Do you actually have anything set up at the moment? No, we don't, but what we're trying to do is constitutionally or through petitioning Parliament and members of MPs, we want to have a debate in the House and we want a reform of, okay, good luck, and I hope it will work. How long is that going to take? Okay, lawful bank. Right, very good idea. What do you actually have as assets at the moment? Okay, it could go around and it could go maybe to any other organisation that says, well, what do we want? Dave Fishwick, Bank of Dave, licensed deposit taker. Wanted to create a bank, found out he couldn't. The reason Dave didn't pursue it anymore is because he's got assets. And as soon as he upset maybe the banking elite or the FSA, they would have come down and fined him and took whatever he had, his house, his vehicle rental business and whatever else. So it's always important to address what do we actually have in the vaults. Now, the vaults.
They're safe at the moment, aren't they?
Yeah. So the actual assets, if you look at the banking system generally, it was always something that I questioned. How can something not be worth something so valuable? Because all the assets of the banks are their promises, their loans, their mortgages, their loans. The deposits, the cash that people put in, are liabilities to the bank because they have to pay out on them. So that's how the banking system operates to great effect, that it's what it doesn't have that it's supposedly loaned, which is the most valuable thing. So if the Bank of England is going to come along and say, well, this is how the banking model operates, that by us creating a loan creates a simultaneous deposit in the account of the customer or client, then what's good enough for the banking system, the Bank of England, the Bank of France, the Federal Reserve, is good enough for us. But what we have that they don't have on the amounts of money they create is we have taken this perspective that we want to bring in or engage the promissory note as a way of verifying that we actually have a promise. And if you look at your banknotes, you know it says the Governor and Company of the Bank of England promise to pay the bearer on demand. So, but all they'll give you is another £5 note back. So since 1931 in England and 1933 in the United States, when you were ripped screaming, but probably didn't realise it, off the gold standard, from that point on, you did not have the option, apart from legal tender, on how to pay any of your debts, public or private. In the United States, it used to say on the dollar bill, for all debts public and private. On the European euro notes, it says nothing. It doesn't actually say anything. It's just like a monopoly piece of money. So you've got to then look at that point of what actually is the asset. So there is no such thing as money really on the planet. The only thing that is a wealth creator are goods and services. Credit is actually a destabilizer in society, I would say, because as credit increases, the instability of the country increases, and ultimately what the Rothschilds use in, and you can see if anybody's ever read Silent Weapons for a Secret War, it talks in detail there about how the capacitance within the circuit, they create a sparking by occasionally creating war to eradicate the problem caused by credit within the system. So they look at the system as an electrical circuit and find out exactly how many calories or watts is required to keep a human functioning per day. And so it's in their modelling and their quantum computers, we're all just little dots or light bulbs, I suppose. So one part then is to say, okay, well, if we're going to go and try and create this money system, what we need first is we need people's promises. So this is one of the ideas why we're asking people to commit to re-movement, and the bank is just really a side to that. Because my aim and objective is to come back to the UK, and I said this in 2007, I want to polarise the country. I'm going to split it down the middle, and you're standing on a black square or a white square. You're either with this organisation that wants to change it, or you're not. And the vast majority of people are being indecisive, and just like Neo and Morpheus discuss in The Matrix, when they drive down the street and see all these people that are just going about their daily lives, they're not your friend, they're your enemy. And when I was in the camping car doing my Peter of England, I didn't really have a problem with the police or the traffic wardens as much as I had with the people peering behind the windows saying, why aren't you displaying a tax disc? Why have you got no numbers on? It was they that called the police. So I don't have a very good respect for the general level of intelligence there. The neighbourhood watch is all very, very nice and secure, and they've all got us like Stasi East Germany watching ourselves, and the block lighters will rat you out and even encourage your children to rat you out. And that's this typical fascist, Stalinist, tyrannical agenda that they want to have, and it's working very well. So we've either got to buy into it, or we've got to get off this pot and go and do something about it. So how I think we could do something about it is, one, we have the promissory note aspect. The other aspect that we have, or unit of currency, is in 2012 November, I met with a consortium of business people who came from Kuala Lumpur, that's in Malaysia, and I met them in Threadneedle Street, and we went to Cafe Nero there, and that meeting was for the following. They have a consignment of what's called 1934 Chicago Federal Reserve gold certificates, which are were issued in 1934 after Roosevelt's 1933 Gold Confiscation Act. And those gold certificates are to the sum as there's actually 3 boxes, but we'll go with the 2 for now. The 2 boxes collectively are worth 250 billion US each. So there's box 1 and there's box 2, and then there's a mother box which is located on one of the islands in the Philippines. And I know there's lots of stories about this all being a load of nonsense and it never ever happened. But we've got the vice chairman of the Federal Reserve on a congressional select committee saying that the United States does not have any gold anymore. It only has gold-backed certificates since 1934. So that 500 billion, what they've agreed to, and I spent all of last year, that's why I didn't put any YouTube postings up. I think I went over 9 or 10 months without making a post. Most of last year was spent, disappointingly, in negotiations with Chinese so-called connected families of the dragon family. There's the red dragon family, there's a white dragon family, there's probably a polka dot dragon family, to get these boxes redeemed. Okay. Now, one of the people who contacted me who was engineering it, there was actually 2 parts. One of them is located in Marbella, one is in the Bahamas, and the original phone call came in from New York. Said, we hear that you might have contact. So, we've gone through all of the documentation and what have you, and I don't know whether I've actually brought it here, but I have the document with my name upon it, which I am entitled to a 5%, which is dedicated to the bank, a 5% of that, regardless of what happens if it's ever redeemed. However, until that point, they have pledged, or what's called hypothecated, and that just means pledged it to be able to use as an equitable trading instrument with the bank until that happens. Now, if anybody's heard of Neil Keenan, yeah, Neil Keenan has been chasing around, and he's supposed to be the signatory for the global collateral accounts that's been given to him either by the dragon family in China. So there's 2 aspects of the Chinese government. There is the People's Republic of China government, official control mechanism, and then there's all the Chinese nobility that have been the guardians of the wealth that the Chinese empire accumulated for thousands of years. So that's one aspect there, because we can look to trade with that, notwithstanding all the counter-arguments that will come that no, it never happened. We know that it did happen, and they know that it happened, and they know the amounts that were involved. And one of the reasons for the First World War was the setup for the confiscation, 1929, with the Great Recession, leading into the Second World War, where there were 2 parties. There were the National Socialists, which became the Nazi Party, which hoovered all the wealth out of Europe. And then there were the Japanese, who went ruthlessly through Southeast Asia, Japan, Vietnam, Korea, and stripped all the gold and valuables out of those countries and then put them in certain places. And that's why you've got these vast reserves of wealth that are off book and are what's called on the black screens. Yeah? So there's 2 parallel pools of money. There's the official money that they say the gross domestic product of the United Kingdom is 3 3 billion? 3 trillion. Then there is the amount brought in by the revenue, which is 640 billion. So all of that is in our world, and all the real money is in the elite world, in the trust. So anybody that's into sort of pursuing this, then it's quite complicated, so we'll leave it there for now. But this stuff does exist, and if anybody remembers that incident on the Swiss-Italian border a few years ago in Chiasso, where those 2 Japanese were supposedly caught trying to take God knows how many billions worth of gold certificates in. Well, that had all been arranged, that was all cleared, they were supposed to get in, and they were going to the Vatican Bank to present the documents, and Alan Greenspan is one of the people that reneged on the deal and tipped off the police, and the I think it's called the Polizia Finanziaria in Italy, were there waiting, arrested, but they were never charged. They confiscated them, they did a big thing, hoo-ha, these are all forgeries, but if you're going to do a forgery, well, I think I'd put like just a few million on, you know, I wouldn't put billions on, you know, it might sound, you know, so there's arguments there. So that brings us to that. The other then is a little bit more esoteric, and this is the idea that there isn't any money in the United Kingdom, and the best we can do if we want more is to increase taxes. All the major political parties say the same thing over and over and over. It's austerity measures for you, it's wage increases for us, the wealthy companies are getting richer, the stock market, the FTSEs, is an all-time high, nearly touching 7,000. There's 18.2 now trillion worth of debt in the United States. When Obama took over, it was probably about 12. It's been the single biggest increase in history. So the amounts of debt are going up. Look what they're trying to do to the Greeks. Yeah, and the Greeks are thinking of reneging on the deal. They should renege. Do what Iceland did in 2008. The president of Iceland, Olga Grimsson, his YouTube was on the documentation that I had. I put it on the front page of the website. When I got there, it had 7 views. 2 days later, it had been taken down. So it's not available. It's been ripped off by, I don't know who, probably Google or YouTube. And what he was basically saying is that people should do what they did. Reform the banking system, because in Iceland, there is only 320,000 of them. Each person, when the private commercial banks had finished lending out to Warrington County Council for the pension fund, offering them 18% interest, or Stoke-on-Trent, who are one of the biggest, stupidest councils in the world and took a bigger chunk than everybody else, when that actually folded and blew up, each Icelander owed over 400,000, let's say, dollars, which they were never going to pay. He said we were the most socially homogenous community that there was possible to have. We're all Icelandic. We haven't got outside interests. But these banks, these private commercial banks, had run up these amounts to such astronomical amounts that we had to decide, when the people went on the street, started to firebomb Parliament, and the police who were supposed to be protecting them came across onto their side, we knew we had to do something. So at the moment they've got a document called Monetary Reform in Iceland, and the President and the Prime Minister are in the process now of decoupling and going from, as he said, there's been Exhibit A as the baddies in the criminal courts for what they supposedly did, renege on their debt, to being Exhibit A for this new system. And he says since they've actually taken back the money supply to the people, everything's going very well. And, you know, inflation's down, unemployment's down, the economy's doing very well. So far from being ostracized, they've actually taken control, and it's a successful model that they'd like to offer. So hopefully, they will. And why should they work with us? You know, because we've asked, and maybe it's right. Because in between the Greeks and other people in Europe, people need to, you know, we need to join forces and show something. So what we need to show is, this is just I've got these are the covers of the WeRe Bank checkbooks. So I went to the printers yesterday and the books were due for delivery today, but it looks like now they might not turn up, and as I didn't have anything to bring, I'd just like to, I'll hand it here and then it can go around and you can, I'm only just showing it just so you know what these will look like. So that's the logo. The logo says Universal Energy Transfer on the actual check. I can actually pass that one. I'll just put two out just in case one of these sheets goes missing. So these are just the photocopies that they run off the original sheet, so I can bring something along today. If I put one down at the bottom, then you can pass it whichever way you think it should. Okay, so this is just for the purpose of the viewer. We have the checks, which have WeRe Bank on them. They have the address. We've got a clearing hotline. We've got the branch sort code, which is quite important. They initially would not print these because they said, in fact, what they originally said is, as long as the sort code does not comply with any other sort code in the banking, I think it's the check card and credit clearing company in London, then it's okay. Then they changed their mind and said you can't have this on and then you can't have that on. So what the 750181 is the code number for the Common Law Court of Record. So anybody that's followed anything I've posted, if you actually type in either on Google or on YouTube, International Common Law Court of Record, or ICLCOR 750181, that's the number for the International or Common Law Court of Record, which we will use to legitimise any dispute that people say or they might bring up as a topic while we just don't have the right to do this, as might happen. However, it does actually say in the Bills of Exchange Act as well that anyone who is in the business of banking, whether incorporated or not, so you don't have to be an incorporated company, and I don't think technically to go through what we couldn't have gone through anyway. So what we're doing here is being deliberately provocative in a way of saying that this is what we should, as the people, have the right to do, and if you're not going to do it for us, we're going to do it ourselves. So we're really in an environment here of like pushing this envelope and say, well, what's the point in talking to you? What's the point in trying to do this through so-called democratic process when it's nothing but an elected dictatorship, wherever once you elect these goons and jackals and hyenas and white shoe bloody Etonians like Cameron and his bloody friend Osborne and Boris, you know, what a night, and Nathan Rothschild, all at Eton together, all at Cambridge together, all in the Bullingdon Boys Club together. Oh, what a coincidence that those three rise up into into such prominence within the ruling elite. So they won't do it. They don't want to go that way. However, there are people in the background in all of this that want to change. They're not all as bad as we probably would like to think them as being. So there is like, some people call them white knights or white hats. There is a definite undertow that understands that without change it's all going to end up very, very nastily. So there's a lot of political jockeying. There's two main factions, as I understand, on the planet at the moment: the Fourth Reich and the Zionists. That comes out of James Cassabolt and Michael Prince. Is anybody looked at the super soldier stuff? Some other stuff that I've looked at and heard come through. So typically that would be where we're going with a fascist dictatorship down one line, and on the other side we would say that the Zionists...
Talmudic dictatorship.
Yeah, through Abrahamic law, which all of us, everybody's, the Muslims, Christians, the Jews, it's all Abrahamic law, Moses, Abraham, it's the same in the Quran as it is in the Pentateuch, or the 5 holy books of the Jews. But please don't confuse, should we say Ashkenazic, or should we say Orthodox Jewry with Zionism. It's not the same. Go on and look at the protests that the Orthodox Jews have by openly denouncing Zionism. It's not part of their culture at all. They don't want anything to do with it, and never ever maintained that there had to be a separate state of Israel. So the Ashkenazic and the Hasidic Jews with the little thing and the hat, nice people, beautiful. We're going to have them, they'll even hopefully bank with us. So these are the type of people we've got to start to bring in together as a community. So I've passed these around now, so you can actually see what we're dealing with. And so the instruments then will also have attached to them, because we understand it's very early days, it hasn't even hit anyone yet, the first books haven't gone out, but we also appreciate that the underlying logo or tenet here is to stop fighting it and just pay it. But what are you paying it with? You're paying it with your promise, and you're paying it with your energy, and you could also say you're paying it with your inheritance. The fact that everyone here's parents and their parents and their parents and parents and parents before are totally responsible for the net worth of the planet. Okay? If I said to somebody or asked them, who owns the planet? What would the response be? Well, no one. We all own it collectively. Therefore, if no one owns it, then ultimately there is no, I'm talking from like a 4th or 5th dimensional spiritual perspective, they don't have a right to partition it up and say, we are the landowner and everybody else is now taking a feudal tenancy on it at my discretion. It's very antiquated, it's very stupid, and it's got to change eventually, because are we evolving or are we devolving? Yeah? If we're evolving, it's got to get better. It shouldn't be taking us back into some sort of prehistoric 13th century method of existence where, you can't get food and you have to pay for water, like it's happening in Ireland at the moment. There's a big controversy there. So, to try and get this across, I've put something together also, which is a book of checks will contain 50 checks, and each pack will have 50 of these within. So you don't really have to spend too much time writing a letter, depending on what it is that you're looking to discharge. So what you're discharging is, you're discharging within this either prepaid treasury, global collateral account, or the assets that the bank has. Why we had to go down this path of proving that we've got something there is so that we can't be accused, or it can't come across as an accusation of fraud if they say, well, you've got nothing in there anyway. Well, we could say that, as everybody keeps saying, we know the banks don't have anything in there. Yeah, but it doesn't matter about them. We're the ones asking you a question and he's the bright light. So we've got to be able to argue them from a point, and therefore, if it gets to a point where you are taken into a court, i.e. you've decided you want to pay the council tax bill that they've just said you owe $3,000 on, or they're going to send you to jail, you've got to be able to try and prove that you've paid it. And you have paid it because these will accompany the... so if I put one... I brought with me. These will accompany the checks on the checkbook, and it's something called an allonge. It's from the French word allonger, which means to accompany or lay by the side. So under the Bills of Exchange Act, you can attach anything to a bill of exchange or a promissory note to give indication or knowledge to the drawee or the payee, the person who's responsible for receiving it. And what that covers, which I'll go through now, if you could, somebody could just grab, so I don't have to, yeah, if you could just hand a couple of those out. And in fact, here's two more, yep. You don't have to cover it all. I don't even have one for me now. Okay, I've got this. Right, so very quickly, this is going to be the thing. One of the questions, before we get to the questions, is going to be, okay, it's okay you saying that WeRe Bank operates like this and I just got to send them a cheque, but they're just going to refuse it, or they're just going to say, no, we don't accept anything like that. What's my out on it? Well, you'll see on side 1, we cover this. It says, I'm not going to read it all. Notice to payee, the legal departments and accounting bookkeeping departments. It says receipt of a negotiable financial instrument. It explains what one is. Right? So it puts them very clearly in the ballpark. It then uses the classic quotation from Lord Denning, who was Master of the Rolls, about the effects of a cheque on the ledger of the company. Okay? So what people fail to realise is, in the old days, cheques had a clearance, and even now they'll say, oh, it's 10 days to clear. But in that part, is it honoured or is it dishonoured? Well, if they don't present it, they've dishonoured it immediately. So they must present it in order to comply. Because it could be a genuine cheque you sent them drawn on that West Bank. And you've got no money in the account. But they're okay, they've received a cheque. It goes into the accounting department of Manchester Borough Council and it's locked down as received. And you phone up, oh no, it's okay, it seems like it's paid. Only then, a few days or weeks later, when it's dishonoured for lack of funds, does the SI1T hit the fan and they go after you again. So, it mentions that. Okay, so it says this cheque is tendered under the terms of the Bills of Exchange Act 1882, but also the United Nations Convention on Bills of Exchange and Promissory Notes, 1988. There's two pieces of legislation there which are very important. And it says, as such, the drawer of the cheque, that's you, have certain protections, and you, as the payee, that's the person receiving it, have certain obligations, the most important of which is to accept this note and present it for clearing. If they don't present it for clearing, they don't know what we've got to send back to them. And as you've probably put a pound sign on, and you're paying, I don't know, Northwest Water 250 quid for whatever, then who's to say, because you can write a cheque on anything, you know that. You can write it on a piece of paper on the table, you can write it on that hat and send it. So you can write it on anything. You're not obliged to put it on something like this. We're doing this because it's a rollout for this workers' movement or cooperation of people, whether it's Kent Freedom Group, whether it's Get Out of Debt people, whether it's the White Rabbit Trust people, whether it's the people from WeRe Movement who've joined so far, to basically bring everybody together as best we can under. And if this becomes something different in the future, and a different system surpasses it, then we'll jump onto that. But we've got to start somewhere, and the only thing that they understand is an action. So this is why it's important, this is why it's going to go out, and this is why people are coming on by the droves at the moment. So the final part then is, it actually explains here on the back of the note, of that little allonge, notice of dishonour if you refuse this negotiable instrument under what's called a violation of section 42 of the Bills of Exchange. So the violation of section 42 for non-acceptance, and then there's a violation of 43, dishonour by non-acceptance, which if they dishonour it by not accepting it, it releases the drawer of the note from any obligation for further presentment. Now they've either got to argue it or not. I would suggest also, as a little bit of a secret, that if they don't present it and we turn up at court, we'll actually show people that we could have actually sent 253 in sterling. We can go both ways. Yeah? We can either rely on them to throw it back at you and not present it and then not have anything to stand on. But what I think they'll do in most cases, they'll hang on to it. Because that seems to be what's happened in many instances, maybe British Gas example that will be talked about later, that they don't return them to you, they hang on to them. And when you ask for them back, they don't return them. They don't return them because what happens is when that utility bill, or that council tax bill, comes to you, it's really a cheque they're sending to you. It's a cheque for 400 quid. But what happens if you go to the bank with a cheque for 400 quid and you don't sign it on the back? They won't accept it. Because when you sign it on the back, you turn yourself into what's called a holder in due course. And therefore all the liability now rests on you. It's yours now because you've endorsed a promissory note or a bill of exchange.
If they send it back, then that's a rebutment.
Yeah, they've dishonoured by non-presentment. You're free and clear. Now, there's always the possibility, we'll take questions at the end, Phil. There's always the possibility that they turn into a Nazi, Gestapo type mentality and deny their own legislation. But what will bring this out is the fact that as you become more aware of it, more educated, by the fact that they can see more people with an identifiable unity about them, they'll not pressure it, you know, they won't force the issue so much. And as it's got to change, and as people maybe want it to change, none of us know where this is going. And it's a leap of faith for everybody. The downside for you or anyone else that takes the checkbook, there isn't a downside, because in no way can anybody accuse you of, one, dishonouring by not wanting to make the payment, using anything fraudulent, and this is why I decided to set it up, because when you try and present a promissory note or any other instrument to them, as the judge said to one person who asked if they could pay off, I can't force the claimant to accept it. You know, the judge can't make him take it, and if he puts his hand, leave me alone, I don't want to touch it. But with this, it's removing it and putting another entity into the room. It's not you and them against each other, it's take it up with them. So we've immediately presented a triangulation of effort. So it's us now that have got to make good, and we've got to prove that, and if not, they're going to be coming after me, you know? So that's the beauty of it. And I actually believe it's my mission and purpose to accompany this, and let's just put that on the record and we'll see where we go with it. So this, just to conclude then, before we do the questions, and I hope I'm not going on too long, but you're the very first people, by the way, that I've made this presentation to, so it's that new, it's not been said out loud before. And a lot of what I'm hearing myself saying is first time to me, because unless people are asking questions and you're in a live environment, your mind gets very lazy and you just think, oh yeah, that's okay. So just to conclude then, it says, as account payee the holder, Article 15 of the Convention states, a person is a holder if he is the payee in possession of the instrument. Okay, and then it goes, a person is not prevented from being the holder by the fact that the instrument was obtained by him or any previous holder under circumstances including incapacity, fraud, duress, or mistake of any kind that would give rise to a claim or a defence against liability on the instrument. So what that means is that the payee receiving it, is clear to still use the instrument, even if you have presented it in a fraudulent, deceitful, or dishonourable manner. Yeah, because what they can do when there's a signature on these instruments is, once they get into the banking system, if you spend any time reading this Bills of Exchange Act, and one of the leading proponents said, he's the guy, the leading barrister who put the the Consumer Credit Act. Is it 1974? I know there's an update, but he did all the legislation for the Consumer Credit Act 1974. And what he said in 2000 is that there is not a handful of people in the country, not only in the legal profession, but in the judiciary, that completely understands the Bills of Exchange Act. So you're on very, very good ground. You know what a payee is, you know what a drawer is, you know what a drawee is. So some of these terms, holder in due course, endorser, you just get a little library of terms together and you'll know more than the magistrate and the judge. But hopefully we're not going to end up in that situation, because that's not what this is set up for. It's to stop you ending up in those situations. So that's it. It's got the WeRe Bank address on it, it's got the hotline on it, and that, I think for the moment, until we just do these questions, which I'm going to go through a list of about probably 20, 30 questions that have been presented. I'll answer them all very quickly as best I can, and then I can probably even take them away and put them in the frequently asked questions part, which is developing all the time. So we'll do the questions after the break. So we're taking a break now. Thank you very much. Don't forget to subscribe. Okay, we're resuming. What I've just it's been suggested to me that I'll just cover this one point for people who will be watching this in the coming days or weeks ahead, and that's just on the topic of overwhelm. As I say, I've been trying to engineer this this banking alternative for quite some time now, and I've tried repeatedly in different ways. And 2015, for whatever reason, let's say it's an act of grace, seems to have exploded it all of a sudden onto the scene. Whether that's because of the inevitable people have just had enough and really want to react or not, I don't know. But this is just a precursor. If, for example, we say to you that a checkbook should be delivered within a particular period of time, at the moment that is good. So if we say within a week or 10 days, that's good. However, if we get overloaded, as a preemptive, I'd just like to say we'll have to probably stretch that to about, it could be 3 weeks or as much as a month. So for all those people there who are watching this now thinking, yes, I've been waiting 2 weeks and it's still not arrived, please be assured that is only because of the amount of time that it takes for the books to be reprinted and delivered to us and then put into a pack and posted on. There's only one of me or one or two people at the moment, and we're possibly going to get overwhelmed. So let's not get hoist on our own petard, as they say. That means blown up by your own bomb. Okay, thanks. Right, so now what I'm going to do is run through quickly a 25 question sheet that's been provided to me by the good people at Get Out of Debt. I'm going to cover them briefly, not too long, because otherwise we'll be here forever. And we're going to take some questions from the floor if they haven't been answered here. One thing I want to address, because I didn't touch on this, is the bank assets when I covered the hypothecation of the 500 billion, the promissory notes, and also the ability to do what the big banks do and create our own loan procedures. And this is something that the politicians should be talking about, but is totally taboo, and that's the fact that we are all told that there is only one way to raise revenue in the country, and that is to add to the 350 taxes and the over 1,000 stealth taxes that drag us down into the ground every day of our living lives, from the revenue raised through speeding tickets, parking fines from the local councils, from the VAT, the self-assessment, etc. Now, all of this money brings in a total of around about £640 billion per annum. And that's all those taxes that are breaking your back. The GDP, that's the total, the gross domestic product of the United Kingdom, is about 3 trillion. That's all the goods and services that are produced by the people through the whole of the country for 1 year. Now, what we find is that many people have spoken about this in the past, and it's something called a transaction tax. A commercial transaction tax is a tax of meagre percentage that is applied to all commercial transactions, no matter what, and the amount of, let's say, in fact what I'll do is I'll just go through a few organisations that you've heard of. There is the London International Financial Futures Exchange, which is also linked to the New York Stock Exchange. So that's Life, that's not the London Stock Exchange. So there's Life, which is, and with the New York Exchange. There is LCH Group, which is London Clearing. There is the CHAPS system, which you've all heard of. There's the BACS, yeah, the Banking Clearing, and BarX, which is Barclays Clearing System. Of those 5 alone, in 2013, the total transactions were £1,845 trillion. And a 1% tax on that would have brought in 1.845 trillion. So, if you take the 640 billion, the total amount of revenue raised by the Chancellor, clever boy George Osborne, cokehead, and realise the fact that with a 1% tax applied to his buddies in the banking and financial services sector, it would have brought in 3 times as much. You could eradicate, therefore, PAYE, VAT at 20%, council tax, road fund licence, BBC, licence fee, all the parking across the country, the speed cameras could go. All of that would give you a liberation and a freedom, the likes of which you would probably fall down on the ground by release of having the burden taken off your back. And that 1% is easily imposable, and it doesn't include London Metal Exchange, London Bullion Exchange, and various other exchanges. And it always runs at about the same fraction or percentage right the way throughout Europe. And so this is something that, it sounds a little bit crazy, but sometimes crazy works. What I have done is I made a declaration that as part of a people's bank or political movement within WeRe movement, I've hypothecated that amount, 1% now, on all those commercial transactions and welded it to the bank through WeRe movement, which is the political or anti-political arm of the organised collective, so that what we can do is we can actually say to anyone that's coming along who say, but how would you fix the health service? How would you fix the roads? How would you improve this? How would you improve that? Well, we would immediately cut down this thing called international stock market capital. Yeah? Google in 2014 only paid 2.4% tax in France. Yeah? Corporation tax in France is about 34.4%. They don't pay it because they engineer their ways out of it. All the big corporate entities within the United Kingdom are just leeching the money into what's called Treasure Island depositories in places like Isle of Man, the Cayman Islands, the Bahamas, Panama, and sucking it out. So when people say there's no alternative to raising VAT, or there's no alternative, and you have these guys going, yes, but we would do this. But if you cut that, then what about the nurses? Or what about education? If you cut from here, you've got to give there, and it's not going to work. A 1% transaction tax, which has been discussed time and time again, which never gets brought up or allows its head to be reared in meaningful debate, would sort it all out. There's a very good video on YouTube by Bill Nighy, and he actually covers the topic of the transaction tax. As little as 0.5% would go, but to be quite honest, 1% doesn't really matter either way. So this is what part of the idea is, that we start to basically credit it on the fact that we can use it as a spending pattern for informed people who are part of an organisation that want an alternative lifestyle and want to sort of march parallel to their system. They've got all that profit and all that transactions that are going through. What we're basically saying is, with that 1%, we can make it work, and that's added to that. So, right, let's go through now some of these questions quickly. First one from Woody65. How realistic would it be to use the cheques to buy a property, land, or perhaps a vehicle or mobile home? At the moment, we're trying to make it public facing. So what we're trying to use it as, and this is the beauty of it, is it's a defensive mechanism. We're not trying to get you to go and convince your friendly neighbour or your baker to take a cheque because he's delivered bread or post or whatever and you owe him for it. There's no reason that that can't come, because that's what the alternative unit of currency, the WeRe, is for. So that people start to trade with that, because as soon as they start to do that, it releases not only you, but it releases the other side, the retailer or vendor, immediately from any public taxation liability. Because there's no VAT, there's no income tax, there's no other taxes liable on a unit of currency other than legal tender or sterling. So for now, I wouldn't recommend it for the moment, but it's definitely the way to go. We are looking to get a credit card or an electronic-based card put together, and also an idea for a money carrier, so you can actually enter onto the, anyway, I won't say too much about it because someone will copy it. It's something, if you go on PayPal now, you can have your money designated in euro. Somebody sends you Canadian dollars or sterling or American dollars, you've got multi-account function. There's no reason why you can't download that onto an app or onto something else, and also have a unit called WeRe on there as well. There's also this what's called proximity software now, or Wi-Fi, yeah? So you can actually just scan across someone else's unit and you can hit a button and transfer 20 credits off yours onto 20 of theirs. So that's being looked at. So this isn't, there's a lot more where we're going, is what I'm trying to say. This is just the start. Johnny Fourlegs, to pay public liabilities, would this include any commercial payment and only exclude private payments? For example, I would like to pay my rent to a private landlord, which is managed by an estate management company and is also paid for heating oil. Would this come under the public liability? It's a bit like I just said for the first one. For now, yes, they can accept it, but in a way they have to agree to accept it, and that's the sort of part of the sales perspective of bringing people on board that are willing to accept the unit. We don't have to ask the public liability because they'll be billing you in sterling. You need to then make them go away in sterling. What we then are going to do is, and we've already started it, to build up this alternative exchange in a unit called WeRe. And for anybody who is now listening to this, just type in www.WeRe, that's WIR.ch, and that's WeRe Bank in Switzerland, which was started in 1929 on a principle originally under the ideology of free money. And they only use what's called a monetary unit of account. They don't have what's called scrip, they don't have Swiss francs. They only trade between what's called the WeRe economic circle of trust, and you can see in Switzerland on the hotels, the restaurants, the white goods shops, you can see a logo which says WeRe accepted, and so you can pay in certain percentages up to a limit of 100%. So it's got a model of it working. Just to let you know, this isn't like, oh, a unit of currency can't work, you're going to have pounds in your pocket. No, between, I think, 70, 18 and 20% of all the small, medium enterprises in Switzerland depend and bank with WeRe Bank. And they reckon it's one of the fundamental reasons that the stability of the Swiss franc has been, or the Swiss economy has been as it has been. Because there's an alternative there and people use it. And so you can't get those units in your hand. All it is a banking unit of idea. Okay, so that's one. Next one, C. Redsky or CC Redsky. Could someone ask Peter if he still exercises his right to travel, and if so, is it only in his mobile home? The mobile home now is in France. It's parked up in the south of France, and it's still got the Peter of England plates on, but I don't drive it around too much now, and if I do drive it in France, I have to put a normal set of plates on it, because there's no messing around with the gendarmerie over there, especially if you're a foreigner. So it's a slightly different thing, and so the short answer is I'm not driving it around at the moment, but it's still there. Basil's Bounty. Will this account appear on my credit file in the same way as my current Main Street bank account? No. Basil Bounty, if the promissory note credits my account with 150,000, then it will improve my credit rate, but will also set off the currently defaulted account bloodsuckers, or will it, who I could send a cheque to, of course. No, because we are not subject to any agency regulation, not subject to any government organisation, not subject to anything that you would describe as statutory law or governing by the government of Westminster, full stop. That includes also HMRC, local councils. We are totally outside of that, and setting up what I would say is to defend the truth. So we're not attacking, we're just defending. We know we've got the truth, we know we've been exploited, therefore, as they won't change it for us, we change it for ourselves. So it's a defensive ploy initially, until we take over the citadel, as we will. And for all my spiritual hierarchical friends, you know, who are listening there, somebody's got to get on the coal face, and that's us, and we've got to get the coal up. You know, they can't do it wherever they are. So if we're making the effort and we don't get the sustenance and the energy and the protection and help we need, well, nobody can come along and point fingers at the end and say, well, you just didn't try. So this is it. This is trying time. There you go, that's on a bit. Basil Bounty. What would the procedure be if anyone refused to accept a cheque? That's well covered in this thing that will come with your cheques, and it's called an allonge. It's under the Bills of Exchange Act, and it's sections 42 and 43, which are refusal of presentment and then notice of dishonour. And a small point on the notice of dishonour: within 3 days of them sending it back, you need to protest it, what's called a notarial protest. And if you can't get a notary or don't want to pay a notary, and I probably wouldn't even bother with them, under the Bills of Exchange Act and the UN Convention, it says that if one isn't available, 2 people from your neighbourhood or houses nearby can act as witnesses for you to protest it. And this is what happens. It closes the door and seals it from being a ball that can be kicked back and forward. If they send it back to you and refuse, you make notice of protest, and there you go. So I hope that answers that question. Tiger Cat, am I correct in thinking that operating through the WeRe bank, we would all become in a way our own employers, with the bank paying itself our wage? Is this not open to wide-scale abuse? No, it isn't, because all that bank is doing is actually facilitating a creation of wealth for you. It's no different than you going to a Deco or Blue Arrow, and they charge the employer 13 quid and pay you 6.50 for 1 hour's labour. What we're basically saying is that you have a right to work. You have the right to work as many hours as you wish to work in a week or not. And what we'll do, if you notify us of the work, there's a circle or a system of honour. And sure, if people want to abuse the system, then, you know, transitions are always difficult, but it doesn't affect the bank. We have infinite supply, and we can credit whatever that work that you do is to your account. But that will be credited in WeRe, not in sterling. And that's the important part. So we'll carry on there. And also what we've done is we've set out, if you see the frequently asked question, some people say, well, I've got 150,000 or 148,000 WeRe units to pay down on a 10-year maturity promissory note. That works out at whatever the hours were that I think I can spend. Well, I might not be able to do it, and what if I don't manage to pay it down? What we've said there is that we are now putting a new initiative in, or it's a new idea, that your normal 9 till 5 weekly working employment can be lodged as billable hours for paying down the promissory note. And that's based on the predicament that if you're being paid £7 or £8 an hour, you should actually be paying a lot more, and we value your time activity that's being stripped away from being able to help and support and change community. So for the compensation and reward for you subjecting yourself to this ongoing slavery, we'll allow you to twin that stream onto us. So if you're working 40 hours a week, at whatever hourly rate you're working at, you can take that straight across. So that's just thinking outside the box a bit. Okay, next one. Who decides which of the 3 units of exchange rates apply to which job? Because if people look at the little leaflet or the master document, we refer to 3 separate categories of payment. Category A, Category B, Category C. Initially I wanted to go for just one category, but other people were saying, well, why should someone who is a dentist get the same as me just cleaning something at the side of the road? But equally, in a utopian environment, we should all get paid the same. I think it might be just dropped down to 2, or it might just go to 1. I've got to admit that's something that we'll all decide. So it is changeable, but as a unit of workable energy, the minimum unit on the sea level is 8, which is equivalent to about £16 an hour minimum at the moment. So approximately. So that's the answer to that. And who decides? We'll decide as that gets tweaked, because I've been a bit lazy there, because as an ideological or philosophical perspective, I don't really know. I could see it being much better to have 1. It simplifies everything, but there might be a time when, yeah, so I don't know on that one. Okay, Tiger Cat again. Why do the names and details of all members have to be made open to everybody? Isn't there a loss of privacy here? Yes, there is. But we can either, what we're trying to do here is build a network. And if people are going to inhabit this fear agenda of not wanting their names broadcast, well, maybe we could have that as an option on the join form. But what we're trying to do here is, like in ancient Rome, make sure everybody can see each other and see the numbers growing and take strength and ability to change whatever they want when they actually see people. Also, if you have a job of work to be done, you need to be put in touch with somebody who wants to do it. So the idea was, when the website goes to its next phase, what we'll do is almost like a barter exchange. You'll have wanted and you'll also have available. So people can maybe mix and match, and there's an electrician who needs some work and you want your electrics doing, there you go, or vice versa, or however. So that's the idea behind that. Next, Tiger Cat. Why do the names and details? Okay, sorry, Tiger Cat. How many businesses currently accept WeRe? The units, we've did a trial run in France in 2011. We had 4 small retail outlets that came on board. I've actually put together a little. This was the original book whereby we went from we went to the old paper-based system. And if we go locally, we can probably keep it to a paper base, because we want to be labour intensive. We don't want to be totally dependent on systems being taken down and ruined by a computer. So this is like a book in triplicate here. And what happens is, when you do your work, it gets signed by the person you've done it for to say they're happy with what you did. That then has 3 copies: a red, a green, and a blue. 1 copy you have. 1 copy the individual you've done the work for has, and then that 3rd copy gets sent by the person you did the work for into the bank, and then it gets credited. So that was the credit system, and it's very similar to how money was accounted for in the old days. And then what you simultaneously have to keep is a bit like, some people might remember the old TSB red sort of canvas book. You have a little book like this, and you can see inside here, for example, on the 24th of November 2011, I did I did 5 hours work and I got so many units credited, and then I did 3 on the 28th and I did some on the 27th. And so what I did is, for everybody I did that bit of work for, gardening and things like that, I got them to sign the book. They didn't pay me, this was one that was done in France, they didn't pay me any euros at all. And so arguably you would say, with their signature there, with the statement, as long as it's true, that I did work, who is to come along and say that 20 hours of work that I did, doing this, that and the other, does have no monetary value? It does. It's just like you going to an agency for a week, working 40 hours, and at the end they say, sorry, it's not worth anything. Well, what do you mean? You know, I've just spent... And that's all we have. Our energy is the money, and the unit of time, which is the defining aspect of the WeRe unit, and just so people want to know what's it defined as, it's 1/8766th of a mean solar tropical year, which is defined as 1 hour. And a mean solar tropical year is the time perceivably it takes for the sun to make the Earth to make one revolution of the sun between Tropic of Cancer and Capricorn. So you're on a unit of time. And everybody on the planet has got a finite supply of it. You've only got the number you've got. You can't double it, and this is why it's a protected currency. And it's very important to understand that. Because if I'm saying to you, how much credit or debt can you run up? Well, how much can you pay off? I can't give you one which says you've got to live to 120 years because you can't pay it down. But it's good for everyone, because all human beings, within reason, have a life expectancy, which according to the UN is about 70.2 years. So what we've also done is extrapolated 70.2 years, times it by days, times it by hours, times it by 7 billion, and hypothecated into the quadrillions monetary units of account, which are all there, available as the time that the human global population has as an energy mass now. I think that's quite good. Anyway, I thought so, but some of it may be a little bit far out for now. Okay, so is it a requirement that new members have to be endorsed by 2 existing members? No, that was just introduced initially because what we were always aware of, that once it started to go in a regional area, that we didn't want people coming in who were probably less scrupulous than many and abusing the system. But now we can see that they can't abuse the system because we just make good no matter what. So if people want to start copying it, and everybody wants to start copying checks on their Xerox down the road, great. I mean, you know, because what that's going to do, it's a bit like V for Vendetta, when all those masks turn up by whatever, you know, everybody in the country, in the end, turns up at the Houses of Parliament on the 5th of November with the mask on, and it's just... So I hope that doesn't go that way, because we want to maintain some type of, you know, development on it. But ultimately, you know... Oh, and all the checks are numbered, by the way, so we know who has every book. At the moment there's no account number on, because it would just be too costly, because they'd have to do 50 run of one number, then another 50 run of another, etc. So, there you go. Okay, where is WeRe Bank's central clearinghouse that one needs to go to in order to get the units credited to one's account? Isn't this a timely and potentially cost way of getting paid? Tiger Cat again. At the moment, it's just really sort of where I'm hanging out in Stoke-on-Trent. There's 1 or 2 other people, one in Birmingham and maybe here already, that's looking to set up region units. But the idea is, and there's a guy called Stuart in Scotland who's also want to set one. So the idea is these are local. This isn't central bank control. This is regional control, local, with a central oversight. And the oversight is only like just saying how we think it should go, you know. And if we get it right at the beginning, as I've just discussed in the break, it should continue right through. It's always the conception and the birth that's important, because a lot of people set things up with an idea for making money and bettering themselves. I haven't set it up for that at all. And so, just like a crystal can't grow any other shape, as we got the form right at the very beginning, it should grow and be, it can't, you know, as they say, you know, you can't get magpies from crows. It's going to be what its parentage is. Would a bank account, okay, could a bank account be applied for by or in the name of a private trust, assuming the beneficial interest of the straw man has been conveyed into that trust? Yes, most certainly. We encourage that. Or that. That was from Straub 3. This is from Sally Nay, N-A-E. Does this bank have any foundational documentation, a paper trail, if you will, and an executive running it? Who are they? Well, there's just me, and there's no executive. There's no articles of association. There's no memorandum. There's no doctrine of incorporation. There's just something that you'll find on the website. I think it's what's called the WeRe Movement Manifesto, which is just an overview of a free man's declaration of what we want to achieve, and that we all have the right to self-determination and not to be crushed under the weight of statutory legislation by delegated parliamentary jackasses and idiots, and you know, that want us all to go off and fight in wars that we don't even want and we didn't even start. So in a nutshell, that's the basis of that. We have a paper trail only from the point of view of the assets that we say we lay claim to. So, Sally Nay again, who owns the bank? I ask this because I use Facebook as an example. It is a wonderful creation which was then sold and has become a tool for the selling of information. Again, there isn't an owner, there's just people, and as you can imagine, from the community-based environment in which it operates in, if one is set up in Birmingham, if one is set up in Stoke-on-Trent, if one is set up in Exeter, Bristol, and in all the regions, how can it be? It can't be controlled centrally unless it's in some form of, therefore, we employ. So anybody working in these local, regional centres will get paid, and they will get paid in units called WeRe, and it's labour intensive, and we need people to work in them. So we don't need fewer, we need lots, because time is worth money, and the only thing that is money is the goods and service. So if you're paying for goods and services, then if you see the nature of money, we can produce that. Just as a quick point there, when I went down to see the People's Voice just before it closed, you know, after only 3 months of running, I was going to make a suggestion to David Icke, because he had so many people working there as volunteers. The idea was, why let them just work as volunteers? Why not actually pay them in some unit of currency? But we didn't get round to it because it closed very quickly thereafter. Sally Nay again. Accepting that one's legal name is used in certain sectors as a mechanism for double bubble and appears to be a mechanism for the Crown control via registration, will WeRe be adopting a more anonymous approach where, like a Swiss bank, for example, all checkbooks and information will merely contain an account number? Yes. We want it very minimalist. All we need is who the person is, how we get in touch with him, and that's it. There's no accounting, and there's no declaration to any alternate authorities like the previous question. So, Sally Nay again. Is there a founding charter for this bank which can be read? Yeah, really, it's the first page on the landing page on the website, which just says that the function is a directive to free the people from this debilitating mind control, financial slavery that's been imposed upon them with ruthless and efficient, tyrannous dictatorship principles. So that's what we want. We've got to change the system and start living again. Sally Nay again. Clearly it's in an embryonic stage. There's a degree of control in relation to printing and managing. However, are there plans in place for a potential of are plans in place for a potential for huge take-up? Yes, sort of, but it's sort of caught me a little bit cold on this one. There is a mention of local recruitment, but given the charging for checkbooks, accounts, etc., is there not a real risk of this being identified as a pyramid scheme? Please understand, I mean, no disrespect, etc. Well, it can't be a pyramid scheme because the nature of a pyramid scheme is really like a Ponzi scheme, that there's actually no real assets within. And so if actually you're taking delivery of something for something, You might as well say, you know, as the Bank of England's a Ponzi scheme of notes there. So, yeah, there's always a risk, and you can always call anything a pyramid scheme, but it isn't. Soline again, naturally there are going to be costs in setting up something like this. However, is there any form of guarantee that having paid for a checkbook and an account, they will be accepted to set off, so paying bills? In la land, the legal world, the legislation is there to achieve this, but they are prone to changing legislation at will. In a society where bailiffs are becoming even richer, does WeRe Bank have any sort of system in place to protect the property of those who will rely on their WeRe Bank account to relinquish their debts? That's part of the re-movement, that's part of getting badges, streetwear, caps and all the rest of it, which will come out of the funding of this, i.e. people who join. And this is what we've decided to do, or I decided to do this time. People before were asking for advice from Freeman Legal Services, and so I was doing that on a piecemeal basis. But what we need now is to bring people on board, and the idea is to also, as the organisation grows, it puts back into people's minds the fact that the wealth of the country is a bit like it was in the 60s, 70s and 80s until the unions were broke by the Thatcher regime, and broken for a very important point. Because the only thing that the working man, the person who generates the power on the planet, ever had was his time and his labour. And if he wanted more money, he protested. But once that ability to protest had been taken away from him, if he wanted any more money, what did he do? He went to the banks to get credit on credit cards. And what the Knights Templar motto of the 8th century, 9th century was, always wrap your enemy in one of three things: debt, litigation, or a shroud. And that's what they do to everyone. They litigate you, and a shroud is just the wrap that they bury the body in. So it was efficient, and that's what they live under, and that's what they do to us all now. Now everybody's in debt, and therefore you can't get off the rat wheel, because the moment you do, you have the high court enforcement officers, the sheriffs, the bailiffs and all that nonsense after you. So the only way this is going to change is when people are going to help you, for maybe a mortgage company that decides to keep running the red light, that when people come and help you protect the property, then they turn up with an identifiable form of organisational identity, which could be RE or re-movement or the logo, so that they can actually see that they're all together, not people just all turning up in, you know, different forms of clothing. So we need to do that, and so it doesn't matter where you are or which logo it ends up going under, but when you turn up for business, they've got to be able to see something. It's a bit like in the old days, the Roman soldiers beating their shields with their swords and things. It's got to be an identifiable, meaningful energy delivery system to the opposition. Okay, Assassin. Will the bank accept commercial liens by either registering them now, the system has closed ranks, and stopped registering them, or would they buy them at a reduced rate and enforce them against the defendants? Liens we haven't really any probably need for at the moment, because we always find, I found, it's very difficult to get them to actually stick, because you need to go into their system. So for now, it's something that we wouldn't concern ourselves. From what else is possible? I have a 115,000 interest-only mortgage. Would I be able to pay off that in full with one cheque immediately? Also, your literature says you have to be introduced by 2 existing members. We've covered that before. The second part, for 2 existing members, no. The first part, yes, totally possible. Because a mortgage of that, and another important point is that over the past, since 2012, the people that have come on prior to this new formation have all pledged promissory notes to WeRe Bank. I think that rests at the moment of around about 12 million, no, 50, between 12 and 15 million that has been pledged already, with 1 or 2 other instruments that somebody decided to put together, which probably, if we go down there, we'd say that push it up towards 20 million. So with that amount, yes, even at the moment, without these other notes coming in, we have enough under what's called conventional negotiable instrument financial practice, of being able to say that we have assets. They can't say they're not assets unless they just want to publicly just absolutely tell you, you know, you're lying, you're not a human being, you don't have 2 eyes or a nose, which is always a possibility, but it can only go on for so long. What else is possible again? Could I do my daily shopping, food, clothes, petrol, household, etc., and pay it all off with one of the checks? Probably not possible, though we can maybe try and make it possible, because that's one of the things I'd like to try and do, is to show people how we can go and pay for things like fuel, pay in the supermarkets with these, and they will come on another video as part of something called Creative Descent in the weeks ahead. Lollipop 1969. As a relatively newbie, still learning, are newbies welcome? Yes. And the very final question, when the utility write back stating they don't accept the payment, which they will, are there any plans for how peeps to handle the backlash? Yes, it's something I've covered earlier, and it's this piece of document called an allonge, which cites sections 42, 43, and I think 45 of the Bills of Exchange Act and the United Nations Convention on Bills of Exchange and Promissory Notes, which shows that they have dishonour if they refuse presentment or what's called non-acceptance. And that is the end of those questions. And just on that point, just make sure when they do send it back, you make this within 3 days a notarial protest. And all that means is if you can't afford or find or don't want to find a notary, you just note for the record with 2 witnesses it's been returned and you are protesting it for non-acceptance. That's it. Thank you. Questions are going to be from the floor now, I suppose. Yeah. Any questions?
Can you create a template for that one, for that return, that notary?
Yeah, there is one going to be available. I'll put it on the website.
Yes. Okay.
It needs to be included on here because I've forgotten, but we ran out a bit of space and we're down to 10-point font already. So that will go on, and that's why I actually think there's been a door left open. I only found out about it a few days ago when I was going through this. And, if you don't protest it, it's still like a game of tennis where the ball is still in play. The moment you protest it, it's called out, and then you go for the next thing.
With the checks, if we get money, if we exchange our energy for WeRe, we can then do it in sterling to the companies.
No, what I'm saying is that the way that it goes now at the moment, and this will be made much more clearer on probably the landing page or the join page, the main principles are re-movement just means what it says. To re-something is just to change it. So we want to sort of recalibrate, re-account, reform, reappraise, redress. So all of these things is what the ideology is, to change everything, because virtually nothing is right and nothing is how it should be. So when you actually join, what we need, like a union membership, so think of the £10 a month as joining Unison or the NUT or the Transport and General Workers Union. You're now part of a union, and the union gives unity and it gives strength and it gives benefits. The next part then is, if you want to have access to the checkbook, what we try to do is to show the system that we're not being irresponsible and not letting you just go out and write this, what is it? What's it based on? This as the judge would say, this check thing of yours. I'm sure they've got no money in there. Well, actually they have, yeah, they got quite a bit. And that's by the fact that you have pledged to, the Knights Templar used to do this, they used to pledge all their wealth to the temple or the Knights organisation. And they had nothing. But wherever they went in the world, they had everything. They'd always get housed, they'd always get fed, they'd always get provided for, they'd always get horses, they'd always be looked after, because they were itinerant. So they renounced their possessions in one location to own the world. So the judge isn't going to have to say to you, well, what do you mean? You've put a promissory note in? No, the bank has got, whatever you want to say. It's got millions on account with financial instruments. And what are these exact, this is the type of thing they come out with. So you don't have to say that it's yours and you can draw down to the 150. Collectively, you don't know how much is coming and going on any one particular day. People could have only signed 5 checks for the whole month because there was a glitch. So there's only 50 quid gone out, but there's loads of others come in. So you're sharing the actual aggregate wealth of the pool in excess of the note at any one time, if that makes sense. See what I mean? And you don't therefore, you can then, with the check, as a defence on the public side, only go up to probably, I think at the moment, to that limit, that 150 on the public liability. Which depends on the rate at which you can pay down. But we've also had to put that in, because somebody's going to say, well, how's he going to pay it off? We've got to show, just like at the bank, we're responsible. So we're not just making it up as we go along, it's being paid down. Is there a paper trail? Yes, there's a paper trail. So what part of this, are you disagreeing with? And then as far as the accepted unit of currency is concerned, that over time, as we grow, means that more people will trade and use that and not have to rely on the sterling. But we can't do it from day one because it's just, people don't understand that, it's a bit of a leap from day one. But as an accounting procedure, it gets you to where you're going. Because what's to stop you saying to them, right, I'll pay you in WeRe. It's a monetary unit of currency as agreed within the group. Now, the only problem is, could you say, have they agreed to it? And they might say no, but what do we care? And the other thing is, if anybody wants an electronic transfer, they say, no, we're not prepared to accept that for whatever. No problem. We'll send them electronic transfer by email. And I will say, what's the outstanding on your?
300.
300,000 has been debited from your account, electronically transferred to who? Who are you with?
Nationwide.
Nationwide Building Society. There you go, electronic transfer confirmed. We've debited your account 300,000. We credited their account 300,000. We have an accountancy paper trail. It shows that you took a short-term loan out for between 150 and the 300. The next day the 300 went out. You're 150 in a hole. How we'll sort that out. But short-term loans via bank in Switzerland do loans to the businesses. That's where it generates so much of its, and they charge a flat fee. So anyway, it's very interesting stuff because you think they've been tricky in how they've raped the planet of its money. We can be even trickier.
Once the first set of books have gone, do you have any idea of what sort of time it will take to get the next lot printed?
Under a week, maybe depending on how busy. Yeah, in under a week. So we shouldn't have a problem. And I've already mentioned to the printers that we're already, because it's a bit sort of, it's taken me by surprise. Today is incredible because I thought maybe I'd come down and it's 10 people or 15 and it's great. So it can work. It really can. I've never felt so confident. And I've had so many disappointments over the years. I'm like, I have to keep pinching myself because I almost think it's a dream. And that's the problem, I nearly didn't come back this time because my girlfriend said, oh, not again. You keep going over there and you keep coming back with, always smiling, but it'll go eventually. So now is the eventually, and I think it could be quite an auspicious year, and why not, So anyway.
How do I go on that as a pensioner, because I can't produce any liquidity with doing any manual work, if you like, to get credits to put in the system?
Well, you can do probably some things. You can answer a phone.
Oh yeah, I mean I could
You
work.
could
just
work.
can't find the
No, you could work doing anything. Can you do your own garden? Have you got a garden?
Yes.
And do you look after it yourself, or do you pay someone to come in and do the cutting of the lawn and landscaping?
My lad does all that. He's
Your lad does it.
yeah.
Okay. Well, then you bill. He can. Does he charge you?
No.
Right. Well, he does from now on. Time's money. I don't care what you're doing. Are you driving the kids to school in the morning? How long does it take there and back? Are you fixing the cupboards up in your mum or your grandparents' house? Yeah. How much you charge them for it? Don't be daft.
Yeah.
Well, you do now. It's
Yeah, I mean-
time, it's labour, it has a value.
The only thing I do is for friends. I mend CV radios and all that.
That's
sort of
it.
stuff.
Well, you
Don't-
book your hours. Book
Don't-
your hours and get into this belief system. You know, it's worth something. Write it down. We're not going to, to be quite practical, we're not going to be asking for it every day. But what we do want to try and be assured of is if we sort of said, okay, could you show over the last year, you haven't got to spend all weekend filling in a book, all in the same coloured ink, going, I did all that on the day after, and
Well, the trouble is, I'm honest.
because that would exactly. We're not like them. Okay, so you can do it, and there's an analogy as well. I discussed this with a professor of logic and maths at Keele University in 2011. It's the old scenario of this balanced ledger. You've got to have a plus before you can have a minus. And the discussion really centred around me maintaining that a 90-year-old lady who needs her roof redoing can't enter the system because she just doesn't have anything to contribute. Okay, so let's kick her out. There's a guy who's a roofer, 25-year-old tradesman, not working at the moment. He'd love to do a roof, but he's got no one to do it for. It's a very difficult time. Look at the system. Conventionally, you'll say, sorry, you can't have your roof done. I've got no way of getting paid. Don't worry. We step in, no different than the old lady coming to the bank manager at NatWest and saying, will you give me a 10,000 loan for that roof? The roofer turns up, does the work, gets the pay, he doesn't know where it's come from, doesn't care. In our system, we step in as the bank and also the provider. So she provides the necessary secondary part of the equation. You've got to have a glass to put the wine in. I mean, if you've got a glass and no wine, you don't have a glass of wine. So you always got to have the male and the female to come together to provide the system. So we say to her, okay, there's goods and services as well. So there's no problem with the labour, but what about getting the tiles, you might say? Well, we can get around getting the tiles. But the biggest percentage charge in all of these things is usually the labour. So we get him to do it. Who loses? No one.
The government with a bit of
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly, thank you, we like that. He's happy, he gets his account credited in, let's say 10,000 units, which he can go and trade. Similar on the WeRe bank in Switzerland, what's called circle of, they call it a circle of trust, a bit like Meet the Fuckers or whatever, you know that one? So they call it that. He gets that, which he can trade. The old lady gets a new roof on her head, and we're dead happy because we facilitated an exchange, a universal energy transfer between the two. It's faultless. I honestly believe it is. Okay.
Any more questions?
Who's we then? Because you mentioned your others. Have you got who are these other people?
Yeah, there is. Do I say we when I speak? Often. Yeah, my girlfriend tells me off about it all the time. It's my spiritual guides, and it's a collective we, but it includes you as well. So I like to think, and I've always done it, so we think, or we have decided, because I like to include everybody in it. But when I mention it through there, I mean, I used to do a lot of meditation. I've spent time with the Buddhists, and so I've done a lot of this. So I always don't look at it as me being that, and I don't claim authorship. I don't claim an ego-based, oh, what a great idea, it's all mine, it's piecemeal, it's out there, financial transaction tax is out there, barter system, via bank in Switzerland, 1929, it's been going since. So there's been very, very good minds out there that have tried and failed, and all I'm doing is putting my, it's all the same ingredients for the cake, it's just I'm trying to make the cake, a little bit, let's put the currants in last. It's a different cake. What sort of cake's that? It's a currant cake. Look, there's no currants in the rest of the cake, it's all on the top. So it's that's it. So that's what I mean when I refer to we. It's all of us, and that's the way I hope it will go.
Peter, Sterling's legal tender, I can't understand how they'd allow WeRe
Yeah.
to subvert their Sterling legal tender.
Yeah. Okay. So it's a good question, and that's the challenge. This is the point where the immovable object meets the irresistible force. Yeah? So this is a point of creation. Legal tender is very narrowly defined money. Legal tender is just your banknotes and your coin. So what percentage of the money supply on the planet is legal tender and what's not? Roughly what percentage is legal tender globally? Any idea?
3%.
So most money is checkbook or bank ledger money, or what's called monetary unit of account. The point I made earlier is the point that there are these alternatives. There's the Bristol pound, there's this thing called a Chiemgauer in Germany. In France there are alternative currencies, but they're all changeable one for one back to the original currency. With this, it's a non-return valve.
Yeah, but how would they allow you to pay the public side, say council tax? They'll say you know what sods are, they'll probably say we just want it in sterling, not in anything
That's
else.
like saying you can pay in ice cream. Okay, so you turn up with the ice cream, put it on the desk, and they go, oh, no, only strawberry. Yeah, we don't take vanilla. We don't take choc chip. So if you actually look at the definition of what money is, it doesn't say. So this is why, otherwise you wouldn't have all these financial instruments and all these other things floating out there.
Yeah, but they control all that.
Yeah, they do.
They won't give the control up unless...
Yeah, but yeah, okay. But the entire point is, we're not asking them to give up control. What we're saying is, these are your regulations from the public side. These are the things that you prevented us from being able to extinguish. So all we're doing now is trying to honour that. By not fighting it, we're paying it. Yeah? Because this is the thing that people have gone up against in the past and lost.
But at the end of the day, the money in your pocket, the pound note, are just promissory notes anyway. And £20 note is what, £20 of what?
Yeah, of nothing.
What is it?
No,
£20 of nothing.
It's just a belief system. And so until we... And it's like all... Yeah, anyway, so I appreciate the point, but we're coming up nearly to... Any more? One more minute. One more question. No?
No more questions? Okay, well, Kev's coming up afterwards, but we'll have a 5-minute break, and if you'd like to thank Peter for his presentation.
Debt Free TV, in association with GetOutOfDebtFree.org.